Thank you, everyone. Would just like to acknowledge my co-authors here, Steve Hollish, who's in the room beside me, John Clark and Dan Banks from Halton Region. Thank you all for contributing to this talk. I'm going to be talking about how critical review of the water well information system data renewed the debate over the continuity of a buried bedrock valley in Halton Region. So next slide, please, Rob. So the map that we see on the right here illustrates the buried bedrock valleys that lie throughout southern Ontario. And as we know, there's buried bedrock valleys that lie across Canada, buried deep below the subsurface. But the one that we're looking at here and we're going to be talking about today is the one in Georgetown, which sits just west of here. You can see the red line that's dotted on there. Unfortunately, I don't have a mouse that I can click on, but the dotted red line that you see there is the buried bedrock valley that runs from above the escarpment. Oh, thank you, Rob. And the yellow line that runs through there, that's the Niagara Escarpment itself. So we're sitting just west of here in Kitchener-Waterloo right now in the little town of Georgetown, or the village community of Georgetown. So what we were looking to do for this project was to characterize the buried bedrock valley system for Georgetown's municipal drinking water supplies. These buried bedrock valleys tend to have, depending on their orientation, are filled with sands and gravels, which become suitable municipal drinking water supplies in many areas of Ontario. So in Georgetown, the bedrock below the escarpment is the Queenston Shale, so these sand and gravels become very important water supplies. So the project was to identify the source of the drinking water for those supplies that sit within that buried bedrock valley below the escarpment. And next slide. So Halton Region has been protecting their drinking water supplies and delineating wellhead protection areas for several decades. Back in 2009, this is going to be the first one that we're going to talk about here. These are the wellhead protection areas. So these are areas that identify where the source of drinking water to those wells that are located on the right are coming from. So the 2 years kind of denoted in the pink, if you see that pink line that goes through there that has the 2 year written on it. And basically what was interpreted back in 2009 was one continuous buried bedrock valley that went from the Georgetown area on the right-hand side up through the escarpment, which is that north-south trending pink line that runs through the middle, and then up towards the town of Acton. So you can see the size and the shape of this wellhead protection area kind of extending from the east, moving towards the west through that 2, 5, 10, and 25-year protection zone. If we fast forward to the next slide, by the time the year 2011 came along, these were the wellhead protection areas for Georgetown. So the two maps that we showed were slightly different scales, so it's a little bit hard to compare, but the first thing you should notice is that I guess they're coming from different source areas. And this is because there was a change in the way that the buried bedrock valley system through Georgetown and specifically up through that Limehouse area that circled on the left-hand side, how that was interpreted. So what we have here now are the municipal wells that are denoted in blue. Now we have a much more, if you could say, radial or just a slightly different extent. Yeah, you can just see the extent here is much different than the one before. So Rob, if you flash to the next one, this is basically the same. If we put these two at the same scale, the original one there and then the revised one over top, you have a much different orientation, if you will, between the 2009 and the 2011 delineations. And the key difference between the 2009 and the 2011 was this buried bedrock valley. So if we go to the next slide. We started this project in 2021 as a source protection study for the region of Halton, and our aim was to delineate new wellhead protection areas for the Georgetown wells. And the first thing that we did in that, as part of that study, was to revisit the previous interpretations. So there was the first interpretation from 2009, which was that this was one continuous buried bedrock valley that ran from Georgetown through the Limehouse area towards Acton. And the second one was that there were two distinct valleys that were separated by a bedrock rise at the Limehouse area, which is denoted in that, the square. So, thank you, Rob. No, that's great. So this is a cross section going through AA prime, and you can see the 2009 interpretation is the line in green. And it was of, quite a large, deep buried bedrock valley system. So as part of the study in 2010, 2011, what they did was they drilled a two wells, MW1010 that lies in the central portion of this this figure, and MW111, which is just to the right of it. So as part of the 2010 study, they wanted to determine where the extent of this buried bedrock valley was. And so they drilled these two wells and they actually found the top of bedrock surface was much higher than what was previously interpreted. So this led to the new delineation of this, the buried bedrock valley that we see in 2011. You can see it's much shallower than what was delineated before. So they were not saying that there wasn't a buried bedrock valley, but it was much shallower than what they interpreted. And basically, the bedrock rose to an extent that the two valleys, the one that extends to Georgetown and the one that extends over towards Halton, were separated. So if we go to the next slide. So this is how things look in plan view. So the 2011 bedrock surface is illustrated on here. So they had delineated this bedrock valley kind of as illustrated on these dotted yellow lines here. So the one extending to the east, going towards Georgetown, had a low about 250 meters above sea level. And then as you see the separate valley that's on the western side there is that other dotted line with an elevation of approximately 269 meters above sea level. And we have this interpreted rise of about 312 meters above sea level in this red box here. So the deepest portion that they identified that was in this area was approximately 285 meters above sea level. That was from the borehole that was drilled in that 2010 study. So this made us think, what was the data that went into this? So if you advance to the next slide, we'll look in detail at what exactly is happening in the Limehouse area itself. So we looked at the borehole data and found that there was one borehole there that has an elevation of about 312.4, and the remainder of the wells in the area seem to support that, yes, there was a bedrock rise in this area. They also ran some geophysical surveys. You can see there's a little pink line that runs along that fifth line through Limehouse, and we'll take a look at that at the next slide. So this was a seismic resonance and seismic refraction survey that was done at that time. And we went back just to the report and found that, yes, this was basically the information that was used in the 2010-2011 study to say that there was no valley. You know, taken rate from the report there, the bedrock elevations based on the seismic refraction results ranged from 283 to 293. So basically elevations that were higher than those that were seen in the boreholes to the southwest and the northeast, suggesting that this valley is not continuous through this area. So if we go to the next slide, this one well kind of stood out to us, and it seemed to be a lot riding on that one well that has an elevation of 312. So we pulled the water well record. So if we go to the next slide, this is the water well record that showed up. We were kind of hoping that was, you know, maybe some kind of gravel or something like that that had been interpreted as top of rock. But no, it seemed pretty clear the top of bedrock was about 3 feet below surface. And that correlates to a top of bedrock surface of 312.4. So exactly as the surface has delineated. But one thing that did stick out, Rob, if you click the mouse once, was that the town of Milton had been scratched out on the water well record, and the lot that had the number 14 had been scratched out and replaced with a 22. This made us think maybe the well was in the wrong spot and has been moved from somewhere else. So if we go to the next slide, this well was drilled in 1996. So this is the lower portion of the water well record. This was drilled at a time before water well drillers were required to have GPS coordinates on them. So what happens was the water wells were given to the ministry. The ministry then looks at this map and then they identify where the coordinates should be. So we were hoping maybe this was in the wrong spot again, but you can see there it has the 22nd side road and fifth line, approximately 300 feet and 180 feet off of there. Everything seemed to check out. So what we found was that only through the use of the owner's name did we start to try to connect the dots. So if we go to the next slide. The well owner had a very unique name. So this is the well owner for the one that had the water well of the top of bedrock surface at 312.4. His name was Irwin. I've reserved his last name for privacy purposes, but Irwin K. We Googled that, and unfortunately, Irwin passed away in 2009. But what we found was his online condolences had this from Jennifer M. and Ivan. Again, we protected their names just for privacy. But if you notice in the highlighting there, sorry to hear of the passing of Irwin. He was one of the first to welcome us to the Fifth Line family. So we knew then that Jennifer and Ivan and Irwin all lived on Fifth Line, which is exactly where the water well record had put him. And we were no further from identifying whether this well was in the right spot or not. So we decided, why not just search for Jennifer M. and Ivan? And if you go to the next slide, they actually had written a letter to the editor for the Milton Champion newspaper. And if you look down at the bottom, they had said the Fifth Line south of number 15 side road is a dead end, has 20 residences along its 1 kilometer. There are 4 historically listed structures, and it goes on and on. And then the top of the next paragraph was, this proposal disappoints us and our neighbors. So to us, this puts Ivan and Jennifer and Irwin at Fifth Line at number 15 side road, not 22nd side road. So this led us to believe that, yes, that well is most likely in the wrong position and therefore should be moved from the 15th or from 22nd side road down to the 15th side road. This was pretty decent information, but we wanted to dig a little bit further to make sure that this was indeed where things are. So if we go to the next slide. There we go. So this puts the Fifth Line family, we say Irwin, Jennifer, and Ivan, down there. It's right near Sayers Mill for those that can read the tiny little font. This is in the town of Milton. And so it would move the well from way up there, if you can see the blue star, down to the yellow star at Fifth Line and 15 side road, suggesting that the well was incorrectly located due to the wrong map by the driller. So if we go to the next slide. So to make sure that we had this right, we went back to the water well log, and as you can see, so the original well log was filled incorrectly, that it was the town of Milton, and many of these images that you've seen on here are from the Oak Ridges Marine Groundwater Program, and they do have, for those that are members on this, and I give a shout out to those guys who put all this together, but you just click on a little box that says lot and concession, and I was thrilled to find that lot 14 and concession 6 pop up. Putting that well exactly in the right location. So I think this suggests that, yep, thanks, Rob, that this is in the right spot, but just a last check on the geology. We look at Irwin's well on the left-hand side. You can see the fill in the upper portion to 0 to 3 feet. And looking at another water well on that road, you can see the exact same thing. You've got topsoil and stones for 0 to 3 feet, and then limestone underneath there. So I think this is pretty compelling information to suggest that this well is in the wrong spot and should be relocated. So if we go to the next slide, what about the geophysics? So we had that geophysics survey that was done. They had that dotted red line that was suggesting that, that the top of bedrock surface was quite a bit shallower than what we might think if there was a buried bedrock valley there. And we went back to the report, and what you'll see there is highlighted in the red box at the top. The red area indicates a very strong or a series of discontinuities. It's not certain if it's related to boulders or multiple voids, but it's most likely related to multiple fractures. So at the time, if you can just click once more, Rob, they had interpreted that blob or that area above the white line as being fractures in the bedrock. But it could be that those were related to boulders and that buried bedrock valley actually continues further to the northwest than the borehole that was drilled at MW 1010. So as pure luck would have it, just a few days, maybe 2 days after we'd done this work, Milan Sidham called me from a very different, for a very different purpose. And I said, I'm not sure if you remember, but you did this work back about 10, 12 years ago in the area. And I said, do you remember? I said, one of the wells that was within the area now has been potentially relocated, and we're not really sure if the valley's there. And if you advance to the next slide, Milan got back to me within a day and said, yep, I think actually that based on the new information that you have and the fact that that well doesn't exist, we think this buried bedrock valley may actually exist and may just be a little bit further to the northwest from where the previous well was drilled. So this suggests that drilling may be needed, and based on the knowledge that whether this valley is here or not there has serious implications for where their source protection areas are going, that additional work is needed. So if you go to the next slide. Yeah, this is now the data that we have to move forward with. So we have that low of 269 in the southwest, and we have another low of approximately 250 in the northeastern part of the slide here, and we have no data in between now along that Limehouse area to raise that the bedrock surface up. So at the moment, we're thinking that this valley likely is continuous again, but only time will tell, and only data will tell. We had hoped to have a well in the ground before this presentation came along, so we have a big finish. But as it is, Rob, if you flip to the next slide, we're still looking for landowner permission to start to drill and complete the story.